One piece of smart technology could help solve a murder mystery in Arkansas.
Two Pine Bluff teens are in jail tonight facing murder charges. Police say they are in custody in connection to the shooting death of two 17-year-olds.
It was a bizarre story in Russellville, Arkansas today. A man who reportedly quit his job over low pay went on a shooting spree with two handguns.
Tributes are pouring in for Ann Presley. The Little Rock TV anchorwoman died over the weekend.
A suspect in the deadly Fayetteville shooting on New Year's Day in court this morning.
A Little Rock mother is pleading for help tonight. She is asking anyone.
Thanks for listening to Strictly Homicide, an Arkansas true crime podcast covering lesser-known cases out of the natural state. I'd like to start off by thanking my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to help support us, you can find us on Patreon and help with as little as $1 a month. There's also a donate button for a one-time donation on strictlyhomicide.com. Please stay tuned until the end of the show to hear a few promos from some of my favorite shows. Warning: Strictly Homicide covers cases that include sexual assault, violence, and homicide. Episodes may contain explicit language and are not suitable for young ears. Listener discretion is advised. Hey y'all, thanks for downloading episode 19 of Strictly Homicide. I want to start this episode off by thanking all of my listeners for being so understanding during the unexpected break I had to take. Episode 19 is part 2 of the Rushed Execution series. I'll be covering the case of Don William Davis, the other inmate who was scheduled to be executed on April 17, 2017, along with Bruce Ward. This episode takes us to Rogers, Arkansas, located in northwest Arkansas in Benton County, which is in Fayetteville metro area. Rogers was where the first Walmart was located, with the corporate offices located in Bentonville, which neighbors Rogers. Air rifle enthusiasts may know of Rogers for being the home of Daisy Outdoor Products headquarters and Airgun Museum. Rogers is the 6th most populated city in the state, with a little over 66,000. The city got its name after Captain Charles Warrington Rogers, the vice president and general manager of the St. Louis and San Francisco Railway, better known as the Frisco. Rogers was established in 1881, the same year the Frisco line arrived. The first retail store in Rogers was owned by H.L. Stroud. He purchased a dry goods store on the corner of First and Walnut Street, later moving to the north side of the 100 block of Walnut Street, and eventually building the brick building in the 100 block of Walnut Street. The Stroud family was the leading business for Rogers until 1962, when Sam Walton opened up Walmart Discount City Store, located at 719 West Walnut Street. By 1993, after 190 years in business, Stroud's closed its doors. Rogers was ranked the 18th best affordable suburb in the American South by Business Week in 2007. This was also the first year Rogers hosted the Walmart Northwest Arkansas Championship, a tournament for women on the LPGA Tour. Notable people of Rogers include AIDS activist Ruth Coker Burks, actor Matt Cornett, American football player Ryan Hale, country music artist Joe Nichols, the famous gambler, golfer, Ann Hustler, Titanic Thompson, Sam Walton, and country singer Vernon Oxford. In episode 18, the first part of the Rushed Execution series, I discussed the attempt of the state of Arkansas to use their supply of the lethal injection drug that was expiring. On March 6, 2017, Governor Hutchinson made an inhumane decision to execute 8 men over an 11-day period. He would schedule the executions on 4 days only, meaning that they would schedule 2 inmates to be executed on each of those 4 days. The first scheduled date was April 17, 2017, and the 2 inmates that were scheduled to be executed were Bruce Ward and Don Davis. I discussed the crime of Bruce Ward and the fact that he received a stay on part 1 of the series, which was the last episode. I went over the lethal injection, executions, and why Arkansas was rushing these executions. I also went over Bruce's case. For this episode, I'll cover the second inmate that was scheduled for execution on April 17th with Bruce and the outcome. Don William Davis was abandoned by his parents and raised by his grandmother. He suffered from dyslexia and struggled with learning disabilities. At the age of 9, they would give him an IQ test, which he scored a 69 on, testing him again at the age of 12, where he would score a 77. At some point in his childhood, he was diagnosed and treated for ADHD. But by the time that he was 12, he had begun drinking and using drugs, which could only bring bad news because drugs and alcohol abuse will complicate the person with ADHD's judgment and impulsivity. Don was in and out of jail from about the age of 16, spending the majority of his life incarcerated. Around 4:15 p.m. on October 12, 1990, Sharon Haley arrived home to find her front screen door taped open and the side door between her garage and kitchen open as well. She carefully entered her home and began looking around. She went into her bedroom, and a handgun that is normally sitting on a nightstand next to her bed was gone. The television was pulled away from the wall, and wires were disconnected and hanging. She immediately went to a neighbor's house where she would call 911 to report the break-in. For her safety, she remained at the neighbor's house and waited for the police to arrive. When the police did arrive, they looked around and then they asked Miss Haley to take notes of what items were missing. Some of the items included several guns and ammunition, multiple appliances, a cassette recorder, a 13-inch TV, 2 of her jewelry boxes and the jewelry that was inside of them, an Amish quilt, a stereo, tools, a crossbow, a collection of Harley-Davidson's t-shirts and a jacket, a special bottle of Wild Turkey liquor in a case, and a bottle of Crown. A few hours later, around 10 p.m., one of Miss Haley's neighbors, Richard Daniel, returned home from a business trip he was on. Once he was inside, he noticed that the door that leads from the kitchen into the garage was open, which was pretty unusual. He walked into the kitchen to see if his wife was in the garage and noticed a rice pan and a bowl sitting out with a cool cigarette butt in the bowl. Neither Mr. or Miss Daniels smoked, so this really startled him. He then noticed that their storeroom door was open as well. He walked over and saw his wife lying face down in a pool of blood. Mr. Daniel began freaking out and picked up the phone to call 911. He told the operator that he wanted to report a murder in his home. Mr. Daniel was returning from a business trip. Not only did he have a solid alibi, but it was very difficult to trace all of his wife's activities from that day. It was Friday, though, and Miss Daniel always went to her hairstylist at 2:30 p.m. For the past 10 years, she's had a standing appointment with her stylist at 2:30 p.m. every Friday. Anytime Miss Daniel couldn't make it, she would call and cancel the appointment. Mr. Daniel informed the investigators of the standing appointment, so they questioned the stylist. The stylist told the investigators that today Miss Daniel didn't cancel her appointment, but she also didn't show up. They explained to the investigator that this is not like Miss Daniel. They then discovered Miss Daniel had an appointment at Rogers Diagnostic Clinic. This appointment was around noon to get a flu shot. They contacted the clinic and confirmed that she did show up for that appointment. It's possible Miss Daniel was returning home from her appointment at the clinic to get ready for her hair appointment around 12:30 or 1 when she walked into a burglary. The police asked Mr. Daniel if he could make notes of the items he knew were missing from the home. Mr. and Miss Daniel's daughter came over to help her dad take notes of what was missing. The items they noted were jewelry, including an expensive watch, a gold necklace with matching earrings and a bracelet, a jewelry bag that contained more costume jewelry, and a Nikon camera. In 1990, Don Davis shared a home in Bentonville with 3 roommates, including his girlfriend Susan. His roommates were used to him coming home with stolen items and were aware of his struggles with drugs and alcohol. On October 13th, Don returned home around 2 a.m., and this time he was not acting like himself. His girlfriend and one of his roommates, Renee, confronted Don about his behavior. He was acting scared or nervous and very paranoid. When his girlfriend asked him what was wrong, he replied, "Somebody got hurt." Don began unloading items from his car, including a stereo, guns, a motorcycle jacket, a cassette recorder, a TV, t-shirts, tools, jewelry, and more. Susan, scared and confused, asked him what he was talking about. Don told her, "Somebody was shot, but I was next door at the neighbor's house when I heard the shot." She asked Don to explain what he meant. He said, "I don't know why she was shot. She was cooperating." Renee noticed a white towel in the car and looked at it. He saw her and told her that there was a gun wrapped up in the towel and uncovered it a little. He then told Renee, as he was covering it back up, "Don't touch it or it'll be your death sentence." Renee, freaking out, told him to take all of the items that he had on her property off. Don didn't argue with her. He loaded everything back into the car and left. He dumped the stolen items in a remote area in the woods, returning home roughly around 30 minutes later. The next day, Renee told their third roommate, Dwayne, about what happened the night before. She told him about the stolen property, what Don said about someone being shot, and the gun. She told Dwayne that she made Don take all of the stolen items off the property, and Dwayne told her that she really needed to call the police immediately and tell them everything. When the police arrived to take the report from Renee and Susan, they went over the details from the early morning of October 13th, and when the police asked to search the home, they allowed them. The police located a .44 Magnum Red Hawk revolver and an Amish quilt in Don's room. The state alleged that Miss Daniel's murder weapon was a .44 Magnum revolver. During the investigation, the police questioned local pawn shops and discovered that Don Davis had came into multiple pawn shops and pawned items. The items that Don pawned were items stolen from the Haley and Daniel residence. By this time, Don had already left the state. He was taking a bus to California and stopped in Las Vegas, Nevada. The police were able to question the local pawn shop owners in Las Vegas. Many of the shops reported that Don did come to their shops and pawned items. They were described to the FBI, and they fit the description of the items that were stolen from both the Haley and Daniel residence. The FBI was able to track Don Davis down in Albuquerque, New Mexico from pawn shop records. This was where they arrested him. During the arrest, Don asked the agent if he could have his cigarettes from his car. The agent grabbed the pack of cigarettes, which happened to be Cool cigarettes, the same brand that Mr. Daniel found in the bowl in his home. When Don was arrested, he was still in possession of some of the stolen items as well. They transported Don back to Arkansas. During Don's trial, defense attorneys were painting him as a person who did not have the chances that most of us had in life. A fingerprint examiner with the state crime lab testified that the fingerprints found on the tape that was used to hold the door open at the Haley home belonged to Don Davis. A forensic pathologist from the Little Rock Medical Examiner's Office testified that Miss Daniel's autopsy revealed that she did die from a contact wound from an execution-style shot to the back of her head. The chief of firearms with the state crime lab had performed a test on the fragments of the metal jacket bullet that they removed from Miss Daniel's head to determine what type of weapon was used.
He testified that the bullet was from a .44 Magnum revolver, the gun that was found in Dawn's room, which was stolen from the Haley home. Dawn's roommates also testified that they saw Dawn with the gun and that on the day of the murder, Dawn Davis admitted to them that someone had died during a burglary, and he was in possession of property that was stolen from both homes. Dawn also left that cigarette butt in the bowl at the Daniels home. During the investigation, they were not able to find anyone who had something bad to say about Miss Daniel. She was very well liked in her community. She loved photography, art, and her church. Dawn Davis was found guilty of capital murder and was sentenced to death. He was also found guilty of burglary and theft of property, which added on 44 years and $30,000 in fines. Dawn appealed the sentence, arguing that the evidence was insufficient to support his conviction because it was almost all circumstantial. The court argued that the evidence is more than sufficient to prove that Dawn Davis was the one who murdered Miss Daniel. Another argument Dawn had was that the courts failed to furnish funds to hire experts in fields of ballistics, sociology, and psychiatry, as well as an investigator to assist in the preparation of his defense, which he claimed was denying a fundamental right to an effective defense. The trial court said Dawn did not name the ballistics expert that he wished to employ, but if he would have, they would have granted his request. Dawn was examined by a psychiatrist at the state hospital and by Ozark Guidance Center at the court's cost. Both psychiatrists' reports revealed that there was no psychosis, but they did indicate that a psychoactive substance abuse and antisocial personality disorder existed. In 2006, Davis avoided death when he won a stay of execution due to a court challenge in Kentucky that claimed the lethal injection was cruel and unusual. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled against the inmates, and Davis was set to be executed again on April 17, 2017. Dawn Davis and Bruce Ward from episode 18 were scheduled to be executed on the same day, and they both avoided being executed after arguing that they should have been allowed to employ independent psychiatrists to review their files. Dawn Davis was so close to execution, he was given his last meal of fried chicken, rolls, Great Northern beans, mashed potatoes, strawberry cake, and fruit punch. In March 2018, Dawn Davis's stay was lifted. A few months later, in July, he pulled out a razor blade, put it to his throat, and cut himself. He was hospitalized and later returned to death row. It's rumored that Dawn Davis has said that he wants to die, but that his lawyers keep preventing his execution. I couldn't find any evidence that he actually said that or feels that way. Episode 20 brings us to April 20th, 2017, the next scheduled date for 2 more inmates. On episode 20, part 3 of the series, I'll discuss Lindell Lee's case, which was suggested to me by a former Pulaski County and Arkansas prosecutor. She gave me the idea to cover the 8 inmates' cases that were scheduled to be executed. On episode 21, we will discuss the case of Stacey Williams, which will be part 4. I want to let all my listeners know that I will be at the Chicago True Crime Podcast Convention. Don't turn the show off just yet. Please stay tuned to listen to a few promos from some podcasts that I love. Mugshot, Go Postal, The Hidden Staircase, and It's Always Funny and Sunny.
Strictly Homicide is written, hosted, and produced by me, Nicki T. The original music is done by Mr. T. No, not that one. My Mr. T.
If you are a fan of the show, please make sure you are subscribed on iTunes and please rate and review the show. You can also find us on Patreon where you can support the show for as little as $1 a month.
If there is a case that you would like to discuss, or if you have any comments, corrections, or suggestions, send us an email at strictlyhomicide@yahoo.com or on social media. You can find us on most social media sites by searching Strictly Homicide Podcast and on Twitter as @StrictlyHMICIDE. That's Strictly Homicide with no O. Stick around to hear a few promos from some of the best podcasts around, and until next time, y'all stay safe, especially you, Arkansas.
You've heard the stories about murder and homicide. But what about the rest of the crimes committed daily? What about the police officer who robbed banks during lunch, or the multi-million-dollar diamond heist? What about the assaulters, stalkers, and arsonists? I'm Lindsay, the host of Mugshot. Mugshot is a new true crime podcast that tells the stories of non-murderous crimes. Season 1 has begun, and new episodes release on Mondays. Mugshot can be found on most podcatchers and on social media at the handle @MugshotPod. I hope you'll join me, but until then, be on your best behavior, or you'll end up with your own mugshot.
Hi, I'm Carla.
And I'm Michael.
And we're Go Postal Podcast, the podcast that is basically a grab bag of fun.
Each week we share crazy stories that relate to a theme, ranging from Burning Man to prison to zombies.
And I give some fun facts of the boobs, booze, and bizarre variety about your favorite places and a slice of hysterical history, featuring a new person or era every week.
We also welcome the Countess, your tasteful guide to modern culture.
Find us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or any podcatcher of your choosing.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Ciao.
Close your eyes and imagine a room.
There's a secret door.
A staircase that descends into darkness.
A room filled with terrible wonders.
It is a library of mysteries, a catalog of terrors. Join us bi-weekly down the Hidden Staircase for stories and cases you probably haven't heard of. You can find the Hidden Staircase on iTunes, Spotify, or any podcatcher. Don't forget to lock your doors and hold tight to your flashlight.
Hello, come right in.
I will. Guys, you were already listening to a fantastic podcast. So why not check out the It's Always Funny in Philadelphia podcast as well, hosted by me, Seamus. Even if you're not a fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the TV show, or you've never even heard of it, you will still enjoy this podcast fully, because It's Always Funny in Philly takes a deep, in-depth look at each and every episode. So tune in on your favorite podcast player today. That's Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, CastBox, iTunes, or Apple Podcasts if that's what they're calling it these days. So tune in today. And now, back to your regular scheduled programming.
Jesus Frank! Jesus Frank! Jesus Frank! Jesus Frank! My life is alive! My life is alive!